This is Right to Life Radio with John Girardi on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400, a production of Right to Life of Central California. And now, here's your host, John Girardi.
You heard it here first. We were the ones telling you Gavin Newsom was planning to make California a sanctuary state for abortion. We were telling you the kinds of things he was going to do. His California Future of Abortion Council, well tied in with the California State Legislature, was recommending all kinds of crazy ideas for how to make California the national hub for abortion. If Roe v. Wade were overturned, if various red states throughout the country were to outlaw abortion, how California was going to position itself to basically be a magnet for abortion tourism, for people in states where abortion is illegal to get on a plane, come to California, get Medi-Cal coverage for their abortion, get their travel costs covered, all kinds of costs covered. Those pieces of legislation have dropped this week in the California legislature, and we are going to tell you all about it. Joining me to talk about it is Mr. Jonathan Keller, the CEO of California Family Council. All right, Jonathan.
That's me.
So let's discuss these, because these are the biggies. We were waiting for this. Well, not waiting as if gleefully. We were not gleefully anticipating it. We were awaiting with dread.
Yep.
These bills that were going to come along. So it seems that the two biggies, and some of these have been introduced kind of as spot bills. Is that right? But
yes.
The two biggies that we see. So for those who don't know, the California legislature has these rigid deadlines by which stuff has to get done, and they have come up with clever ways to ignore all of these rigid deadlines. So by yesterday, February 18th, was the last day for introducing a new piece of legislation for this legislative year of 2022.
That is correct.
So sometimes, though, legislators don't have the text of their bill 100% done.
They're waiting on the unions to finish writing them for them.
Yeah, so they need the unions to finish writing, or this advocacy group, or that advocacy group, Planned Parenthood, NARAL, et cetera. They're stakeholders, as they love to call them. And so what they do is they present something called a spot bill, which is basically just the hollow shell of a piece of legislation. It's just like here's just sort of a loose framework of some kind of legislation we want to do, and we'll just amend it as we go along. As Nancy Pelosi once famously said, you have to pass the bill first to figure out what's in it.
That's
anyway,
right.
So they have introduced some bills, but there are two that have been introduced that are really, really bad that we can see. One of them is SB Senate Bill 1142, which is... Well, Jonathan, why don't you describe it? This seems to be basically a grant program under the authority of the California Commission on the Status of Women and Girls to provide all kinds of grants to provide logistical support for people to have abortions. So why don't you dig into some of this, Jonathan?
So as you said, John, reading this bill so far, the text is very, very Spartan, you might say. They're still working on lots of specifics.
Yeah. So again, this is more or less a spot bill. So they have the basic framework of it, but they can amend it as much as they want in the weeks ahead.
But yeah, the section, let me just read it to you because we got plenty of time in this segment. So it says, all right, section blah, 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 government code amended to read. The commission, upon appropriation by the legislature, may establish a program to provide grants to abortion funding organizations and providers and other community-based organizations, Planned Parenthood.
Well, they're one of the abortion providers.
Yep. Community-based. To help these organizations and providers.
Yeah, if their community is a gazillion-dollar office building somewhere in San Francisco from which they operate Planned Parenthood Marmonti. But anyway, continue. Community-based. It's community-based.
To help these organizations and providers provide direct logistical and practical support for patients, such as travel, lodging, childcare, doula support, and food.
Doula support.
So, John, you may not know this, but I think listeners...
I am aware. I'm aware of doulas. I know what a doula is.
My wife and I had a doula, both with our first son, Hudson, and with our second son, Wesley. Thank God that our doula was there for our second son because the midwife wasn't there by the time he was born. And
I was going to say, wasn't someone not there?
Yes, the midwife was about 10 minutes late, and I should say it was not her fault. None of us knew how quickly little Wesley was going to come into the world. But yes, having a doula there to provide some coaching, provide some support, provide some insight and wisdom for new parents—that's a good thing.
Have I ever told you how uncomfortable the word doula makes me? Because
it is kind of a weird.
Well, no, because I think it's literally the Greek word for slave woman. I'm not joking. The Greek word for slave is doulon, and I don't 100% know, but I'm pretty sure doula is
the female.
Just means a slave woman. So the word doula always oh, I had a doula help me with my birth. Like, you had a slave woman. Did you buy her from the auction in the city of Corinth after the Persians were defeated? Anyway,
that's a good point. I do kind of wonder why they don't have a midwifery is obviously.
This is Sparta.
That's right.
Anyway, sorry. Anyway, I always thought the word doula was awkward. Nonetheless, okay, so this bill is about...
doula.
Yeah, so this bill is going to even fund your doula, your abortion doula, which is even which is completely disgusting. I mean, the point of a doula is to sort of help a woman along, kind of help coach her emotionally, be cheerleader, support, help the woman out, help communicate what the woman wants to the doc if the woman's not doing great. I sort of served as Holly's doodla during her 4 births. But
and John, if this language regarding doulas and everything sounds familiar, let me read you from page 6, directly from page 6 of the Future of Abortion Council.
Okay, so the California Future of Abortion Council, for those who don't know, Gavin Newsom, over this winter, seeing that Roe v. Wade is likely going to be overturned, he convened this governor-nominated council called the California Future of Abortion Council. And what it did was it proposed a whole bunch of legislative initiatives whereby California can become a, quote, sanctuary state for abortion. So Jonathan is reading from page 6 of their report, their recommendations.
Yeah. And if you look at the recommendations, they've got all these headings and subheadings and subheadings. So the first recommendation says the state must increase investment in abortion funds, direct practical support, and infrastructure to support patients seeking abortion.
Right. So this SB 1142 is perfectly in line with that.
You ignore the intro and everything. Just get down to the bullet points underneath. And it says the following recommendations focus on ensuring sufficient financial support for abortions and practical services with an efficient integration among abortion funds, abortion providers, and other practical support organizations. So it just sounds so efficient, John.
Yeah. We wouldn't want it to be difficult to end a child's life.
You got to streamline this process. But here's the paragraph. It says, the first bullet point, funds to support the work of abortion fund organizations, abortion providers, and other community-based organizations that secure practical support needs.
So what's happening here, what Jonathan's pointing out here is, here's this language from the California Future of Abortion Council, from their report. Direct, copy, and paste into the text of Senate Bill 1142, SB 1142. So, and that's... Again, we knew when this California Future of Abortion Council was drafting this stuff, look, there's no hindrance. Okay, there's no roadblocks, all right? The Democrats have 3/4 of all the votes, more than 3/4 of the votes, in both the Assembly and the state Senate, okay? 60 of the 80 state Assembly members are Democrats. 31 of the 40 state senators are Democrats. Not every Democrat on planet Earth is pro-choice. Not every Republican on planet Earth is pro-life. However, in the state legislature, that's pretty much the case. Other than, I think, Rudy Salas from Bakersfield area, who I think is nominally, I think he's kind of pro-life. Other than him, I don't know that there's a single Democrat in either house of our legislature who identifies as pro-life. So if they want to pass this, they can just pass it, and there's no
barring a unusually strong public outcry, which is not entirely impossible. I mean, we saw what happened with AB 1400, the Universal Health Care Bill.
Well, and there's also the other thing. The point I guess I'm trying to make is Planned Parenthood and NARAL and all of these abortion advocacy groups. There's no distance between them and the state legislature. Like, as we're saying, this bill, again, to fund abortion providers, community-based abortion organizations, all these, to pay for childcare, other, travel, lodging, all kinds of things. I think that's what they mean by logistical and practical support for patients getting abortion. That's directly from the Future of Abortion Council report. Paste it right into a piece of legislation. So these state legislators, they're just doing exactly what Planned Parenthood tells them to do.
Let me read the next
to the letter.
The next line from this subparagraph.
Go for it.
These funds are needed for direct logistical and practical support for patients, such as gas, lodging, transportation, childcare, doula support, food, lost wages, etc. And John, here's something.
Lost wages. Wow.
Well,
that's even more.
Oh, it gets even better.
Okay.
Now, this line is not in the official language of the bill yet, but don't worry. There's time to clean this up.
It'll get there.
Funding is needed as soon as possible, with allowances to apply for funds to reimburse for expenses in 2021, retroactive to when Texas Senate Bill 8 went into effect.
Oh, wow. So yeah. So they're trying to, for the few patients who actually flew from Texas to California. Gosh, I wish I could find that news story that talked about how they were saying, they were talking about the fact that, okay, if all these red states outlaw abortion, then we need to be ready to help serve people from those other states so they can come to California. And then the news story covering it said, since Texas passed SB 8, its heartbeat bill, there had been a, quote, slight increase in the number of abortions in California, which was like, well, what is a slight increase in the number of abortion, in the number of people from Texas coming to California for abortions? What's a slight increase?
What would help determine that is if the CDC, I don't know, had some numbers from California.
Like
if we reported numbers to a centralized national government database,
I mean,
and we
could,
cross-reference before and after.
I mean, Jonathan, what are you even talking about? Like, you think like it's not like every state in the union, except for like California and Maryland, provide all of their abortion figures to the CDC. I mean, like, it would be ridiculous to require that of a state like California. Anyway, but that's, again, this is California's grand plan to do everything in their power to allow people from out of state, in the event that Roe v. Wade's overturned, to allow people from out of state to travel to California, get lodging in California, to get childcare, in order for them to come to California to have abortions because their state, their Oklahoma state legislature, their Texas legislature, whatever, has done something to outlaw abortion. That's what they want. They want us to be a hub for abortion tourism. People just coming to California purely so they can have abortions.
And it is, John, I know we decry sometimes on this show the whole idea of, I'm socially liberal but fiscally conservative. We talk about that. In this case, though,
even a fiscal conservative should be like, we're paying for out-of-state people's abortions.
This is the thing. This is the worst marriage of fiscal liberalism and social liberalism. Let's just
totally agree.
Turn on the fire hose and spray as much money at the abortion industry as we can.
Absolutely. All right, when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about spot bills and gut and amend bills and the California legislative process. We will also get to AB 2320. This is the other really bad abortion bill. We'll get to all of that throughout the course of the show on Right to Life Radio right here on Power Talk.
We could talk about a lot of the other bills that are dealing with spreading misinformation and the dangers.
Thinking before you spend all of the California taxpayers' money on out-of-state people to get abortions. Now, I'm going to get to the second of these really bad abortion bills in a second here. But first, I want to talk about this concept of spot bills, the legislative process in the California legislature, and amending bills, how that works. All right. To understand this, you have to understand the California legislative process. So the California legislature has these rigorous deadlines that you have to meet. You have to introduce all the bills that this legislature is going to consider over the course of that year. You have to introduce them by a certain date. This year, that deadline was February 18th. Your bill gets assigned to different committees. So if I write a bill that has to do with health care, then the health committee has to hear it, and maybe the judiciary committee has to hear it if it involves some legal questions. And those kinds of committees, the policy committees as they're called, they have to finish their hearings by a certain date. Then, in order for my bill to continue. Then my bill has to be heard in a fiscal committee, so the appropriations committee, which basically has to up or down any bill in the state legislature that spends money. I have to have them approve my bill by this date. Then my bill has to be approved by the full assembly or Senate, depending on which house I introduced it in, by a certain date, usually in June. And then you start the whole process over again in the other house. So if I introduce my bill in the assembly, I have to go through that whole process in the assembly. Then I have to go through that whole process again in the Senate. As Jonathan and I explained, a lot of times legislators don't get stuff done in time for the deadlines. They don't have their legislation done in time for the February 18th deadline to submit all your legislation. So what do? You introduce these things called spot bills, which is basically just the hollow shell of a piece of legislation. It's just the framework of it or something. And you'll just amend it as you go along. Okay? Just make up amendments throughout the course of the year. It's all Democrats in the legislature anyway, 3/4 of them anyway. So they'll just keep passing your bill as long as that's what leadership wants them to do. And then eventually you maybe will get to some endpoint. The legislative year in California for this year ends August 31st.
Correct.
So finally at the end, you might have the final form of the bill that's voted on by both houses of the legislature, and then the governor has a month to sign it. He has the month of September to sign. Now, it's a cruddy process because you're having hearings on a bill that's going to immediately change maybe changes right after the hearing. People who oppose the legislation are in a very disadvantageous position to actually oppose it because you're trying to hit a moving target, basically. The worst example of this is the concept of gut and amend legislation. All right? Let me give an example. And Jonathan will like this example because it's drawn from real life.
Oh.
Let's suppose that I wrote a bill that had to do about maritime paint, like paint that you put on the sides of boats, regulating maritime paint.
Yes. That sounds like a worthy endeavor.
Yeah, got to make sure that we're not polluting the oceans, got to make sure that, we're not putting carcinogens all over the side of our boats in the, the San Francisco Bay. So I introduced a bill like that, but let's be fair. There's not anyone who really cares that much about maritime paint, other than sea lions, I guess, and probably not even them. So it gets close to the end of the legislative year, and all of a sudden leadership says, hey, Planned Parenthood really wants us to pass this new piece of legislation they cooked up. Why don't we, instead of passing your maritime bill, which has gone through all these committee hearings, passed all these committees, been voted on by the floor of the assembly, why don't we just take a red pen, cross out every word of your bill, and amend it, I'm using scare quotes here, amend it by, again, Xing out every word of your bill and just putting in a whole new bill, maybe something that has to do with abortion legislation.
Yeah.
That happens in the California legislature, where at the 11th hour, with no opportunity for committee hearings, with no opportunity for opposition witnesses, with no opportunity for testimony from any experts, they will X out an entire bill and then replace it, completely replace it with a whole completely different bill. And that's been done to advance abortion legislation. It's been done to advance all kinds of terrible bills. So this is what we're dealing with here. This is not a highly functional republic in which we live. All right.
Barely functional.
Barely functional. All right. When we return, more legislation, more pro-choice legislation, AB 2320, a program to direct funds to clinics that provide reproductive health care for poor counties, next on Right to Life Radio. John Girardi and Jonathan Keller with you today on Right to Life Radio. Something much less pleasant than that song is all of the horrible abortion legislation that has poured into the California legislature just this past week. we are going to discuss now AB 2320. All right, Jonathan.
All right.
So this is another kind of spot bill. It's just kind of the framework here. It doesn't seem like it's very well fleshed out. And what this program wants to do, it's a kind of pilot program. Sacramento loves pilot programs. It's like, how about we try this out for this idea that we want to do anyway? We're just going to do a pilot program.
This will just kind of gradually
increase for no matter what outcomes happen. If we just want to do it, we're just going to do it.
So this is a pilot program in which they're going to basically, let me read the description. This bill, until January 1st of 2028, would require the Department of Healthcare Services, the State Department of Healthcare Services, to establish and administer a pilot program to direct funds to community health clinics that provide reproductive health care services in 5 counties. The bill would require a participating health clinic to undertake specified activities to improve health care delivery for marginalized patients. Okay, so it says this is going to happen in 5 counties. Okay, 5 counties. And they're going to pick a rural Northern California county, an urban Northern California county, a rural Southern California county, and an urban Southern California county. And lastly, the 5th one is going to be in, drum roll if you please, Central California. To select each county, the bill reads, the department shall consider the number of community health clinics in the county, the average income of county residents, the languages spoken by county residents, and the likelihood that non-residents will be traveling to the county for reproductive health care services.
This makes Fresno sound like a highly likely county.
Yeah, like if I would be shocked if Fresno County does not become this county.
Ugh.
Okay. Now, what are some of the things the participating community health clinic needs to do? 1, a participating community health clinic shall do all of the following to improve healthcare delivery for marginalized patients. 1, implement staff trainings on reproductive justice principles, abortion, and trauma-informed care with a focus on serving historically marginalized patients, including people of color, people who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or queer, people who have low English proficiency, and survivors of domestic and sexual violence. Some of those categories were more legitimate than others.
Yep.
Improve spoken language translation services for non-English speakers. Build sustainable partnerships and in-service trainings with local centers, including domestic violence centers and homeless shelters, to strengthen wraparound care. Honor before December 1st, 2024, and on or before December 1st, 2025, a participating community health clinic shall submit an annual report to the department detailing the clinic's efforts and progress with the activities required pursuant to Subdivision A. Now, I'm a little unsure about this legislation, how much it's directly funding abortion per se. Not all community health clinics perform abortion. In fact, many don't. Any federally qualified health clinic is not itself directly performing abortions. But I can't help but think this is leading in that way, given the tenor of this year's legislative session, the fact that this is kind of a spot bill, the fact that it's talking about reproductive justice principles, that's something your staff has to be trained in.
John, I'm actually curious because now I want to look and see if this is yet again directly taken
from the California Future of Abortion Council.
Say the bill number one more time.
Yeah, so this is AB 2320. Okay, AB 2320.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Yeah. So again, this seems to be so this is a pilot program. As Jonathan and I were saying, I would be shocked if this does not come to Fresno County, but it kind of depends. Okay, so the phrase that it uses for community health clinics. Okay, community health clinics. What is a community health clinic? There are a lot of different kinds of clinics that kind of have this, this label attached to them of a community health clinic. Federally qualified health clinics, those are all community health clinics. So they receive federal funding, but they have certain restrictions on them because they receive federal funding. such as, for example, they don't do or refer out for abortions. However, there are other kinds of community health clinics that I think do perform abortions. I think technically our Obria clinic is technically, I believe, a community health clinic. We don't do abortions, obviously, but I think Planned Parenthood might also be a community health clinic, okay? And they're talking specifically about traveling for reproductive health care services. That's the focus here, is to provide these grants for providing reproductive health care services. As of right now, if you live in Visalia, where do you go to get an abortion? You go to Fresno, okay? There is not a single abortion clinic right now between Fresno and Bakersfield, although there are efforts right now to open an abortion clinic in Visalia. So, as Jonathan and I are saying, like, if this bill is going to fund reproductive health care services, and let's also remember, for the state of California, abortion is 100% squarely reproductive health care. That is, there's no differentiation in their minds, okay?
It's, yes.
So...
And the reverse, reproductive health care is 100% abortion.
Right. Well, yeah, pretty much entirely. Yeah. So
the Venn diagram is a circle.
Yeah, more or less. So again, this is a pilot program, and it's going to pick 5 counties to do it. One will be from rural Northern California, one from urban Northern California, one from rural Southern California, one from urban Southern California, and one in Central California. Again, you tell me, what county do you think in Central California it's going to be? It's either going to be Fresno County, I don't know, maybe Kern County, but, I mean, Fresno's a bigger town than Bakersfield, and more people probably travel to Fresno for abortions than travel to Bakersfield. So, I mean, it seems like kind of a slam dunk to me that this program is going to come to Fresno County if the county agrees to participate. And maybe this is where, you know, we at Right to Life can have some influence, that if Fresno County considers this, we need to be there to say, nope, do not take this money, okay? Do not take, if this is going to be money for funding abortion provision, then we need to say no. Now,
Yes.
This also ties in with kind of I mean, I guess in California, this is a bridge way too far, but nonetheless, let's talk about it. We've sort of casually accepted in California that, yes, the state government is going to pay for abortion. Full on, and this was a precedent that was established in California ages ago when the California State Supreme Court basically said it would violate the California Constitution for the state legislature not to fund abortion through the Medi-Cal program. Okay, so that was years and years ago in the 70s. The federal government cut off any federal funding directly to pay for abortion through Medicaid. The California legislature was going to do the exact same thing, and the California Supreme Court said, no, you can't stop funding abortion because it violates the California Constitution, because
How dare you.
People have to be free to choose whether or not they want abortion, and by not funding it, you're tilting the scale in favor of life. Now, that legal precedent doesn't seem to have, its logic has not carried forward to today, where the state of California completely wants to fund abortion way more than they want to fund birth. Okay, so abortion is going to be almost completely covered under any insurance plan, but not all aspects of normal childbirth are covered. Anyway, it's far easier, cheaper, more covered by insurance to have an abortion in California than it is to give birth. At the very least, if some of this legislation that's rapidly passing through the state legislature right now gets signed and approved this year, which I believe it will, the legislation to eliminate all out-of-pocket expenses for abortion, which I think Gavin Newsom is going to sign this year. But I still question, Jonathan, you know, public funding of abortion was kind of foisted upon the citizens of California by our state Supreme Court. It was never voted on by the people. It was never even voted on initially by our state legislators. Our state legislature has more distance between it and the common voter than any state legislature in America, where our state assembly members represent 500,000 people on average, our state senators represent 1 million people on average.
It's a little ridiculous.
It's
More than a little.
it's way out of whack, and we're far worse than any other state in that regard. I wonder how much the average Californian is actually down with state funding of abortion. I don't know.
So,
and I guess this ties in more broadly with this question of, is California going to be a sanctuary state for the unborn, by which we mean, is California going to pay for travel to California for abortion, lodging so you can have abortion, Medi-Cal coverage for out-of-state people to have abortion?
So let me give a tiny glimmer of hope.
Sure.
Just before it gets snuffed out again over the ensuing months.
Go for it.
A couple weeks ago, I had a meeting with some of my online progressive buddies. We ended up going and grabbing a beer in San Francisco, and we were just chatting about policies and everything. And I mentioned this Future of Abortion Council report. And John, you may have seen that the news coverage over the last several days with Gavin Newsom has had his numbers kind of in the toilet. Mm-hmm. It's been really bad. And the area of one of the areas that he's been getting dinged on the most, by far the thing he is underwater on the most, is homelessness. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to homelessness, even liberals in the state, I mean, remember, we see that they have elected a 75% proportionate legislature that's Democrat, but they are not remotely happy with how Newsom is handling homelessness. Well, that's exactly what my progressive friend, who shall remain nameless, said to me. He goes, wait a minute, hold on. You're telling me that this report says that we should pay for abortions for people from Alabama and from Texas instead of taking care of, I mean, at minimum, the homeless people that are on our own streets currently. Yeah. And I said, yes, it is apparently more important to make sure that Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Oklahoma, Texas babies are aborted than people sleeping on the streets of San Francisco get treatment and possible housing.
Yeah, and it does make me wonder, like, I don't know. I mean, after the recall, I think I have very little confidence in the people of California that they're going to ever vote in a conservative-leaning fashion ever again. But it does make me wonder, if California does go this far overboard with abortion legislation, could there be some kind of backlash against it? We'll talk about that next in the next segment to close out Right to Life Radio right here on Power Talk. Not just sitting on the dock of the bay. Getting a little too pro-life here on Right to Life Radio. Thank you all so much. All right, Jonathan. The legislature has now gone completely over the top here in California with introducing bill after bill of intense, extreme pro-choice legislation. There might be more stuff coming.
I got to warn you, though. There's a bill that I think we could get behind and support.
Okay.
I mean, everybody. Assembly Bill 1881 by Assemblyman Miguel Santiago. It enumerates 7 fundamental rights that every child should have. It includes freedom from exploitation, cruelty, neglect, and abuse, life of comfort free from anxiety and worry, fear and anxiety, daily mental stimulation and appropriate exercise, nutritious food, sanitary water, and shelter in an appropriate and safe environment, preventative and therapeutic health care, proper identification. I'm sorry, John. No, this isn't dealing with unborn children. This is dealing with pets.
With pets. Oh, this is the Pets Bill of Rights.
The Pets Bill of Rights.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Well,
I was excited there for a second because I
thought,
finally a legislator who gets it.
Someone might actually want to care about human being children.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
sorry.
Well, I guess we'll take what we can get. So I want to talk about the idea of whether there could be a backlash against this insane pro-choice legislation that we're seeing now introduced in the California legislature. Governor Newsom wants the state to be a abortion sanctuary state. I want there to be a backlash against it, and I don't know if I'm just incredibly engaged in wishful thinking on that score. I mean, I guess
it's
the first
legitimately insane.
I mean,
it is.
It's legitimately insane. It's insane from so many perspectives. We have, the idea that we're going to spend all this money on paying for people in other states to come to California to have abortions, as if that's this wonderful, helpful thing. When we have horrible homelessness problems, we have people leaving the state because it's so unaffordable. We have all these huge problems. I mean, it's a bit of a you can't walk and chew gum at the same time fallacy kind of deal. But I mean, it just seems ridiculous that we're going to focus so much time and attention and funds on out-of-state people to have abortions when we have so many problems of our own. Is there some kind of fiscally conservative sense that people might react to it? I think one of our chief problems, Jonathan, is that 99% of people don't even know this abortion legislation has been introduced. And I question whether at any point in the process more than 90% of the public, more than 10% of the public is even going to know that it's happened.
John, I'll take my progressive friend I mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
This is someone who literally, along with me, is in a group that spends all day, every day, chatting about politics.
Yeah.
And he had no idea that this report had been released and that these were proposals that were potentially coming.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's why this is a quality radio program, is because we talk about stuff that you're absolutely not going to hear about pretty much anywhere else, especially when it comes to state politics. You can find maybe, EWTN pro-life hour, I mean, like, yeah, they could talk about pro-life stuff, but they're not going to talk about the California legislature, doggone it. So I guess that's my first thing is that, I mean, the last thing that almost got a referendum against it off the ground was increasing the gas tax. And that's my fear, is that the only thing, sort of conservative-ish leaning political causes that have enough of an infrastructure and enough money behind them to get the publicity you need, to get people motivated, to get signature gatherers are out there, to get enough signatures to have a ballot referendum, so to overturn a law that was passed by the state legislature. That's called a referendum. It's kind of like a ballot initiative, but it's to overturn a law that was already passed by the legislature. The only groups that can do that in California, that have that kind of money and pull, are like the Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association and these kind of fiscally conservative groups who are like, we have to save historic Prop 13. And it's like, well, nothing against historic Prop 13, but like the notion that it's the Chamber of Commerce, Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, they're the only people with enough money and pull in California to do anything remotely conservative on a statewide basis. And that's my fear, is that as much as I don't really think Californians support public funding of abortion, I don't think Californians support this wave of legislation. Democrat leadership in the legislature likes it. And they're so distant from their individual voters that I'm not sure what else there is to do other than to hire Vito Corleone. No. Please. We like playing a little bit of Italian music at the close of every show here. That's why we're doing it. We're not threatening anybody with physical violence. That's not what we do here. This is a loving, pro-life show. Anyway, that'll do it for Right to Life Radio. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you next week.